So my guy Ben just bought a 2018 Suzuki 300 with 4,000 hours on it. And he wants to know how many hours is too many hours on a used four-stroke.
That's a lot of hours. What kind of hours were they?
I think he said there was 2,000 of them at idle.
Might have some carbon issues that he's going to have to deal with. But I remember being at school one time and meeting this guy that worked for the Coast Guard, FWC, or some like the government or something. He's a contractor that did service. And they ran a boat in shifts. And those guys had, I think he said 16,000 hours on a set of Verados.
Verados. L6?
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Ain't nothing newer than that with 16,000.
Yep.
Gotta love them Verados, dude.
Oh, yeah.
We're just talking all good things about them.
Mm-hmm.
They just last.
They do. I mean...
Now, let's assume that it was original Powerheads.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, who knows? They probably had gear cases and power heads, alternators, and all kinds of stuff like that. But yeah, he said that's what they was running. So
yeah, well,
I mean,
I guess if your wallet's big enough, you can just keep replacing those power heads.
They service them too. Like, I mean, it was a contract deal where it was like the boat ran all the time. So like, one crew would get on the boat and go run for their 12-hour shift. Then they would come back to the dock, and then, they would change shifts, and the other shift would get on the boat and go out. And then, he was in charge
Even at
of
night, like
all
all
night.
day.
It was some kind of a patrol boat or something.
Man,
that they did. I don't know, some kind of patrols or something. It was for.
Imagine how many idle hours those engines had.
Oh, probably 80% of the life of them.
They were probably friggin' running ring free every day.
Yeah, so 4,000 hours. I mean,
since 2018, that's, I don't know. Then it starts getting into the argument, what's worse for the engine, hours or age?
That's a good topic all in of itself, because age is definitely a massive killer.
Right.
And
because you're not going to get an outboard that's 20 years old, buy it, and then put another... let's say you bought a 20-year-old outboard with 4,000 hours on it. You're not putting another couple thousand hours on it.
No.
At that point, the age has gotten to it.
The parts are starting to wear out. The plastics, the O-rings, the gaskets,
Whereas if it's being used all the time and it's relatively new and it just has a lot of hours, for example, an engine that comes off a charter boat. We were talking about two conchs, and Jack, he's got 4,000 plus hours on those Mercury V8s.
Yep.
And how long has he had those on there? 2 years?
2 years, yeah. He puts about 2,000 hours a year on those engines.
Yeah, it's a lot of time. But it happened so relatively, so quick that they'll probably give him, if he wanted, another few thousand hours,
Oh, yeah. It's amazing how far the outboards come. I mean, we just talked our last video about reliable and unreliable. And 30 years ago, two strokes, you would get 1,000, 1,500 hours out of the engine before it'd need, some kind of a rebuild or it would just give up.
Right.
Whereas now, some of these four strokes, I mean, when the outboards first came out, I think they were more considered unreliable because inboards were the bigger thing, and it was a car engine, so parts were cheaper, and it seemed to last longer. But now those tides have turned, and getting 4,000 hours out of an outboard is not an uncommon thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely getting 4,000 hours out of an outboard isn't uncommon anymore. But where would you draw the line? Let's say you're buying an outboard.
Okay.
Where would you draw the line considering the age of it?
Well, the age would be different based than the hours. So, like, if it was the age, it depends on the model. So, like, some models, like we talked about on our last video, have like the first few years that are not that good. So, I'd probably say for most engines about 15 years. A 15-year-old engine's about where I'd be like starting to get concerned about the longevity dependent on the hours. If you're talking about a 15, 16-year-old engine with 4,000 or 5,000 hours,
She probably tired.
Yeah, you're probably talking about a tired old girl right there.
Yeah.
So, I would definitely, but a 5-year-old engine with 4,000 hours, you'd probably get a couple more thousand hours out of that engine for sure.
Yeah, 2018 ain't that old at all. Now, most of them were at idle, so I guess, it's probably pretty carboned up. So, run, what would they use? Ring free, what else?
I'm not sure if Suzuki has a
Oh, that's right.
engine cleaner stuff.
Ones, cause
so like ring free's Yamaha, quick clean is
quick clean. Yeah.
Yep. So I mean, you'd probably be all right to use either or. Probably ring free because it's a Japanese product. So
yeah.
I mean, I'd probably go with, but ring free is super expensive. So quick clean's like $10 a bottle, and ring free is more like $50-$60 a bottle.
Ooh. Well, sure, but you bought an outboard with 4,000 hours. It couldn't have been the most expensive thing in the world either. The hours will start.
I don't know. I mean,
start dragging down the price a bit too. No, I guess.
Didn't you know someone that just sold?
That's right. Yeah. But those are a different story. That's timing. It's the L6, so it's now being replaced by the V10, which is going to be an awesome motor. I can't wait to
play around with it more.
Yeah, to see
We're
how
doing
that
some
thing
repowers
does.
here soon on those.
Oh yeah, I can't wait to see how that thing does. I'm real excited. But the L6, it's going out, it's being replaced, and it's got this reputation for being stupid reliable. So yeah, this guy sold a pair that had 3,000 hours on them for $10,000 a piece because
it's a lot of money.
But they're good motors. I mean, they're good engines, and I don't know the year of them, but they can't be the oldest thing ever. I think it was 350s. Right?
Yeah.
So when did the 350 first get introduced? Not too long ago, right?
It was 14, 15, somewhere around there.
Okay, we're getting there. It's getting a little older, isn't it? But yeah, no, I mean, you could definitely still get some good money for that. Probably because of its rarity. It's hard to get now.
Yeah. Well, they're still not that hard to get, but they're gonna be coming up soon. They're gonna be pretty hard to get. So yeah, probably.
Well, it's hard to get a new one. Because you can't. So
yeah.
So
all the new ones that you get, they stopped making them. I think December, first of the year, somewhere around there. They that was it. They stopped producing them.
I knew somebody that bought. I can't remember if his boat had quads or trips, but he bought a whole set of L6s before
they stopped making
the cutoff. Because he I don't know. I guess he must have heard. About the V10, whispers here and there, and he pulled the trigger on him. He's like, well, heck, I'm gonna stay with some L6s for the rest of this boat's life.
Wow.
I'm gonna just repower with them whenever this thing's ready for it.
So he just bought them and stuck them in his garage?
Yeah, I guess you don't even want to hear about the V10. It's none of that. L6 or nothing.
Wow.
I'm with that guy.
He's a ride or die. So yeah, definitely he's gonna want to run some ring free or quick clean in there. Try and keep the carbon, build up down, because 2,000 hours at idle is definitely where you're going to start building up that carbon, because nothing that, the engine's not getting hot. It's not running high RPMs. You're not being able to burn off any carbon. So definitely.
And it also depends. I mean, since it has so many hours in such a short amount of time, I don't want to do the math on how many services it should have had by now, but how...
Yeah, what was the service?
Was it maintained? Yeah, was it serviced every 100 hours? Every
300?
Yeah, I mean,
got an oil change every 400 hours.
That depends too, because that'll shorten the life real quick. Running some old oil.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I mean, if they've already got 4,000 on them, somebody who's
probably taking care of them.
At half the hours being at idle, I wonder what the other half looked like, because was it a lot, only at trolling speed, or was there some wide open throttle in there, or what was the other 2,000 hours?
There better have been some wide open throttle in there.
Yeah.
You got to clear that thing out every now and then.
So that'd be interesting to know what those are, but I think he's going to be all right.
I think he'll be all right for another few thousand hours.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Change the anodes.
Yeah. Yep. Do yourself that favor.
Definitely change the anodes.
It's a Suzuki. It'll run, but it'll rust just as fast.
Yep.
No, yeah, that's cool. So, But you said, well, what's your, like, let's say it's 2018. What would you cut off the hours at? Would you say it's too much?
If it was a 2018?
Yeah.
Well, I've seen, so there was a trap boat, had a Suzuki 140 on it. And I want to say at like 8 or 9 years, he had like 8,500 hours on the engine. So,
Dang.
I don't know. It's really hard because you start getting up into those kinds of hours. Those are rarities. I mean, they're not like everybody, because normally people do. There's no one that runs the boat that much. These are work boats, commercial boat, rental boats, dive boats. They're being ran all the time. So
yeah, I feel like if you buy an outboard with 4,000 hours in 5 years and then proceed to only use it once every 3 months, it's probably not going to be lasting you as long as you probably won't get as much use out of it.
I'm going to probably say 6,000.
6,000 would have been his cutoff?
Would be my cutoff.
Okay.
But my risk tolerance is probably higher because I'll run anything. I mean, I like the water. I like the boat. So, I mean, I run anything. I've ran all kinds of stuff that probably shouldn't be on the water.
I'm not like that. I'm not like that. I'm not the biggest fan of the water, but ironically.
Yeah. So, no, I'd probably, if for the average person, I'd probably say 4. He's right there. He's right there. 4,000 or 5,000 hours for the average person. I'd probably say that's about the cutoff of hours. It's like these starting to get up there. So, I guess also a factor is going to be the price. So what's the price? I mean,
he already bought them.
Well, he already bought them.
Must have been a good price.
But let's say you've got somebody that's got this engine, 2018 300 with 6,000 hours, and he wants $1,000 for it.
Jump on it.
I mean, so
why not?
So
yeah, run it.
That's definitely going to play a huge factor as far as where would the cutoff be, opposed to.
I mean, how long do you think it takes the average person to put 1,000 hours on their boat?
A few years, because let's say you get to go. Let's say when you go boating, fishing to sandbar, whatever. Let's say if you're fishing, let's say you put 8-10 hours on in a day. Okay, that's a full day running the boat, out there. And you can do that maybe 2 weekends out of the month, because you still got everything else that you got to do. So, and not everywhere gets the boat every month like we do in Florida. So, let's say 20 hours a month. No, that seems low, don't it? I mean, because then you're only talking 120 hours a year.
Yeah, but I don't know. That doesn't sound too far off, because you see a lot of boats that you'll be doing like their 2016 engines and you're doing a 300 hour, and it's like, hold on, is this its first 300 hour? You look at the gauge and sure as heck it is, and it's like, wow, okay, this guy never used the boat. The slower unit might not come off.
Yeah. Well, if you're only running to the sandbar, or you're running out for sunset cruises, stuff like that, you're not putting a whole lot of hours on them. I mean, you go to the sandbar, let's say it takes you 20 minutes to get there. I mean, you're only running
up, turn off.
Yeah. Let's say, so just that trip, you might put an hour on the boat, maybe 2. So in order to accumulate that amount of hours, mainly fishing, people that are fishing, they're going to put the most hours on there, because you're running the engine the entire time you're fishing, unless you're bottom fishing and you go out somewhere, anchor up, and but anybody offshore, stuff like that, or even like well, no, because they'll use trolling motors and stuff like that, but
yeah, I don't know. I don't know much about how they do bass fishing, but I've heard those guys are real run and gun. Like,
they are, but
they get there as fast as possible, throw the power poles down, get to fishing. Do they turn the engine off in that time, or leave it idling?
Or use the trolling motor? And see, I think that's a person specific.
Yeah, well, they've got the trolling motor, so they probably turn the engine off and just
use
switch
the
over
motor
to that.
So I don't think there's anybody that.
So they're not really putting a lot of hours either. No. How big is a lake anyway?
Not that big, and the boats are doing 100. So
Yeah. From one side to the other in a couple seconds. Like, oh well, that's pretty anticlimactic.
Yeah, I'm gonna say the average person over a 5-10 year period is only gonna put like 1,000, 1,500 hours on their engines.
Back to that Verado with 16,000 hours.
Mm-hmm.
You said somebody told you about that at school?
Mm-hmm.
What school? Not MMI, right?
No, it was
like
at
Mercury. Or
yeah, it was
okay.
at Mercury School.
Yeah, I was like, dude, you went there a while ago.
Yeah, no, this was I can't remember what year I was there, but it was another mechanic there in the class, and yeah, he was just kind of talking about what he did, and same thing, talking about things that they've seen, longevity, different boats they work on, and what they take care of, and obviously when you see boats like that, that's a bragging.
Yeah,
like everybody wants to tell that story, like
yeah,
we've got this one boat, like.
That's pretty crazy. I'd like to know the track record on that engine, because it's definitely probably been through a power head, at least one.
Yeah, and a lower unit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
but then it gets to the point, like if there's some kind of government agency, why replace the power head instead of throwing new L6s on there?
Most government agencies on a budget, man. Like remember the government doesn't have any money. They have your money. Like they have our money, and they're distributing our money out the way they see fit. Yeah. But through the taxes. So, yeah, they all on a budget. So, and I can't remember if he would work for like a contracting company that had the contract with that. Whatever it was, I can't remember exactly what branch it was that they worked on. Mm-hmm. But like they had the contract, and that's what they did. They did the service and took care of the boat. So a lot of those, I mean, I know guys down there that do like the FWC stuff. I mean, he schedules all his own stuff. So like he's got his own work area, his own barn, and he tells them when what boat goes down. Mm-hmm. So like this boat goes down on this day for me to do service, and then they schedule it all out. So they're pretty on top of the maintenance.
Okay. So maybe there's some decent hours on that thing. Like not too abusive, not too neglected. I mean, to make 16,000 hours, there's got to be a lot of love involved.
Oh yeah. I remember
love for that motor.
I remember hearing stories too when they were, in the earlier years of the Verado, when they were doing testing and stuff, they spun one up to like 12,000 RPM.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
Really?
He said it made some funny noises.
Well, it probably sounded pretty angry, dude. 12,000 RPM.
Yeah.
That's kind of.
Yeah. That was just one of the Mercury
F1
people.
car things. No, they rate even higher. Am I kidding? Like 20,000. That's stupid. I'd want to hear that in person.
No, that's insane. I mean,
I want to hear that in person. Just because it's like, I don't know. It's got to be because you hear a NASCAR. You ever been to a NASCAR race?
I have not.
It's really cool.
Yeah,
it's super cool. Yeah, like I don't know. You think it's just left turns, but yeah, it is just left. but when you really start paying attention, it's good. There's kind of a lot of skill involved. But really, what 100%. I love is the first lap. I recommend wearing earplugs. But if you're, the first lap, they kind of they have a rolling start through the finish line. And that's when they're just starting to rev up. I'll always take the earplugs out for that one.
Yeah.
And just listen to that V8, 40 of them or however many are out there. And
wow.
It's just, there's nothing like listening to that kind of crazy performance in person. It's like just rumbling in the stands in your chest. You're like, oh my God, it's so giddy. It's great. But an F1 engine revving 20,000, that'd be sick.
Oh yeah.
Now the L6 revving 12. I'd be scared of that thing blowing the heck up.
Me too.
Like, that better be in another room when that's happening.
Well, yeah, it was the Mercury team, probably in the R&D, and just whatever they do, But yeah,
you said at school. Speaking of school, our boy Jacob, he asks about education versus experience and sort of the relationship with salary.
Out the gate experience.
Right. Okay.
100%.
You jump. Yeah, for sure. But it also experience. 100%. Like, I mean, I went to school, and so did you. We went to the same school, 10 years apart.
Yeah.
And the school was good. Like, it teaches you enough to get your foot in the door, you know, but they only have a year. Yeah. So you can only learn so much in a year that's like being laid out for you. But there's nothing like being out there and actually working on the stuff that's broken and seeing like real world things. And I'll take 1 month experience over a year of school.
Yep.
Any day. Yeah. Like, I learned more in my first month at the marina than I did at school.
Really?
But then again, I also, there was a lot of two conchs things always coming through, and that really, depending on how much you're exposed to.
Yeah.
Then it's, it's pretty, it gets affected that way. But he was also asking the relationship to salary between the two. So, because then it gets into the point where education, like you could have who's going to make more money? A 25-year experienced mechanic or a 10-year that's fully certified in Yamaha and Mercury?
The experienced guy.
The one with 25 years will make more than the guy who's like fully certified, like a master tech.
Yep.
Really?
Yep.
Okay. They both still have a lot of experience. I mean, 10 years and 25 years.
It's going to be a twofold. It's going to be a twofold answer because one, it depends on where you're working. So like if you're doing the corporate deal where, there's a lot of political structure and it's a corporate structure where you get paid on, specific certifications, because there's a lot of shops that will pay a little higher for certain certifications. Not many, mostly just like master techs and stuff like that. If you got a master tech certification, you're going to get more. You might get a little bump in pay just for having that cert.
Right.
But other than
I think that a master tech helps the dealer too, right? Like
he does.
Having a master tech.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It helps the dealer, which goes
in turn,
back.
I feel he should make more money.
Well, it depends because it's based on skill. So the amount of money that you make is going to be based on your skill set and what you can do. Because when you take yourself out of being the mechanic and you look at the true situation, obviously every shop's going to be different, depending on who runs, owns, and manages the shop that you're going to work at. That's going to play a big part on how much you get paid, regardless of your certs or your experience. But in the end, if you work for a good shop with a good owner, then it goes back to billing. I mean, you talk about attorneys and lawyers, they are big on their billable hours. Well, it's the same thing in the mechanical industry where your billable hours is directly reflective on your pay. So this guy's got, fully certified in all the brands and this, that, and he holds all the accolades, all that, versus the guy that doesn't have any of that. But when you put them side by side, the guy with the experience can fix, 20 boats in a week where this guy can only fix 10. So the dealership is going to be able to fix and bill 20 more, 10 more people than this guy. So this guy is going to make the dealer more money than the other guy. And the dealer is going to look at that as on a business side as, okay, you fixed this boat, it left, it doesn't come back. Like that's the biggest thing. It doesn't come back. As long as the boat's not coming back and it's fixed, like truly fixed, then they can bill the person pays the bill, you're bringing more income into the business. So the more things that you can work on and the better you can fix stuff, like fixing it right, not just cutting corners, because there are people that work in different shops that have, some sort of a flat rate commission, and they'll try and beat the clock by cutting corners, doing this, doing that, saying I changed the filter and you didn't really change it, like, doing some shady stuff like that. But other than that, if you can bill out 60 hours of work in a week and this guy can only bill out 40, you're making the marina more money. And the more money you make them, then the more leverage that you have to be like, hey, I looked at my billables and, based on my labor, you were able to bill $200,000 this month based on my work.
Right.
Whereas this guy that did less work, he's going to be like, he only billed $100,000 worth of labor for the month. So you billing more time can be like, I made you, obviously you're not, he does, the shop doesn't get to keep the 200 grand or whatever it is that you made him because the insurance, taxes, workman's comp, Medicare,
Sure.
all the operating costs. He's not pocketing that money, but you can be like, I'm billing out X amount of hours, so I think I'm worth this.
Mm-hmm.
And any smart shop owner is going to go, oh, this guy's billing $200,000 and my other guys are only billing $100,000. Well, why wouldn't I want to pay him more to keep him here, to keep him billing out? So it's going to be experience for me over the certs.
Yeah.
But certs are definitely good because you need to know about the products and stuff like that. Like, I mean, we go to school, so you definitely want to stay on top of the new products and how they work, how they operate, because that's how you kind of get ahead of the game. Mm-hmm. Is knowing how to utilize school to gain your experience to be better, not just going to school for your certs. No,
that's true. And also, I found that like a lot of the schooling after I've become a mechanic and I'm in the industry, a lot of the schooling is more in depth. I don't want to call it easy, but it is kind of, on the easier side still. I don't think it's designed to make anybody fail, but it definitely gives you a good, like, the one class I've taken so far was Yamaha drivetrains. Mm-hmm. And up until that point, I'd never taken apart a lower unit. So, although it's a lot different in the real world where all the corrosion and everything has affected this lower unit, that thing in school came apart like butter, like it was designed to come apart. But it, it made me less intimidated to then take apart a lower unit because I had seen all the internals with my eyes and I know what's in there. I know where it goes, how it's supposed to look and all that. And I don't know, it can be used as a good tool for upping your experience. Mm-hmm. But yeah, as far as in relation to salary, definitely experience is more valuable because, like you said, it'll speak for itself when you're billing out. Yeah. More than the guy with less experience. Yep. I've always hated sort of the perception with certs though, like, because there's some people that think that if you're not certified, you're not worth anything. It's like, I don't know. I know people that are certified that aren't worth anything. I know people with all the certifications in the world, and they don't actually know how to work on that motor. No, they know how to fix a. They know how to answer a multiple choice question on a test, and work in a lab. Mm-hmm. But put them on something in the real world, and they ain't gonna get it. No, or at least not as quickly. Right, as the guy with the experience. I think something the biggest benefits are like if you've got no experience, that's kind of like the hiccup, because most shops don't want to hire somebody with zero experience. Yeah, it's a gamble. Just because it's a gamble, exactly. Mm-hmm. So they're going to hire somebody that's a liability. They get on somebody's boat and drop an impact into the live well and break a screen, or they send a screw or something through a $12,000 Garmin, and there's some liability there. You get on somebody's boat and you cut their upholstery up, or Yeah, it sucks to be a young tech because you know enough to be dangerous. Yeah, you know enough to get you in trouble. And sometimes if you start being overconfident, and start thinking all this stuff and just go in there and attack it, and then you break something. Yep. And sometimes you got to have good judgment. 100%. And be able to tone it back a little bit. Not necessarily not be confident in yourself, but be reasonably confident in yourself. Well, also kind of respectful too. I mean, because if you get on the boat like it was your boat, I mean, because some of the boats you get on, I think there's almost a disconnect because these boats have gotten so insane where you're on a $1 million boat. Mm-hmm. So you don't have that connection with the boat.
That connection with the boat. Whereas if you got on the boat and you're, say you're on a $200,000 boat, if you felt personally like you just spent $200,000 on this boat, like you're not up there like just throwing stuff around and like scraping stuff across the gel coat and like, dropping impacts and like doing it, like you're putting rags down, you're putting blankets out, you're taking care of the person's boat, because the person that bought it, obviously he spent the money to buy the thing, and that goes back to the liability and the overconfidence. Like if you don't know, I've seen texts that are like that where it's like they don't think about that. It's like this person just spent $1 million on this boat, like the money might not be that big of a deal to him, because obviously if you're spending $1 million on a boat, you're
pretty well off.
You're working correctly. Like your money's making money, and you're doing well. But that doesn't mean that you didn't still spend the money to buy the thing, and you want somebody on there. So a lot of those people with the higher end boats, they'd actually rather pay more money and not have their boat destroyed than get the cheaper person that comes on the boat and then cuts a hole in their $2,000 upholstery.
Yeah. No, it's experience definitely wins out there.
Yep.
But he also asked about the path to becoming a boat mechanic. What's the path? And I believe also Austin Hall, who asked a few questions, he also asked, how do we both get into the industry? And to answer the one about the path, I can say there's not really one path or two. Like there's all kinds of ways that you can get into being a boat mechanic, into the industry per se.
I'd say to get around it, like get like into a shop. If you got to get in there like washing boats or working in the yard, driving forklift, working in a parts department, like whatever it may be, just get in to, wherever it is, like whatever it is, whatever, find somebody that's got boats, that's working on boats, and get yourself in there somehow. Regardless of what it is, you don't have to start as a mechanic. But then when you get in there, you need to make it a priority to figure out who's, the best mechanic there, and figure out how you can make their life better. Like, don't always look at like how much you're going to get paid or what you're going to make or something like that. If you're looking to like truly make it a career, then you find that person that's doing really like is the better person in the industry and is doing the best at that shop or wherever you're at, and figure out how you can make their life better. Like if you figure out, this guy's, the best mechanic here and he's doing a service, fill up some oil jugs for him, clean up his mess, like, help that person, because that person is then going to be, wanting to turn around and help you, because they're going to be thinking about you and how much you've helped them and you made their life easier. So they're going to be going, oh, this guy really wants to learn. Like he wants to learn. And then the person's not going to feel like they're wasting their time trying to teach you something. And that's going to put you on the fast track to actually becoming, a good mechanic, because somebody's going to devote time to you. But if you're there just wanting to get paid, then you're not going to grow very fast. You may get in the industry and you may make a little bit of money, but it goes back to the experience thing, where that experienced tech is always going to make more than the person with the certs.
Yeah.
And so the way you get that experience is you do it, you do it like that. You get into it no matter what you got to do,
Now, are you saying that from experience? Because it sounds like experience. It's, he asked, how did we both get into the industry? How did you get into the industry?
The water and the boats. I like the boats. I like the water. So I just decided that that's what I wanted to do is, work on boats. I didn't really have any experience.
You'd had a lot of jobs before that, right? Like you were kind of just figuring it out, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I didn't start working on boats till I was, like professionally, until like I was like 23, 24, something like that. And no, early in that, 22, 23. But before that, I was mainly all construction and all kind. I mean, just bouncing around job to job, steel factory.
Had you ever worked on engines prior?
Yeah, my own stuff. Like we had dirt bikes and 4-wheelers and 3-wheelers and, you know.
How extensively did you work on that stuff though? Like just little changes, parts,
yeah,
or
whatever broke.
Okay.
You know, lower unit, impellers, gimbals, oil changes, like just whatever.
Just enough to like spark that interest.
Whatever kept the boat running. As long as we could go to the lake, then I mean that's what you had to figure out what was going on. Otherwise, you're stuck. So, if you want to ride the dirt bike, then you got to keep it rolling.
That's true.
For me, that's kind of like why I wanted to be there, because that was what I like to do. I like to be outside and do different stuff like that. So, I'd work on my own stuff. Then went to school, and it was because I went to school that allowed me to get into the marina. Because kind of funny that like the marina, originally when I moved there, like I moved down to Marathon just because it was an island and the water was good, and so I was like, that's where I want to go. So I was actually working at Publix at the time, and like when I went to MMI, I did the morning classes. So I went from 6 till 12, and then I worked at Publix from 1 till 9. And then I saw there was a Publix down there, put in for a transferred down there. Before I came down, I called a couple of marinas and said, hey, this is, sent my resume, all that kind of stuff. And, they said, just stop in and see us if you move down here. So when I got down there, the first week I was there, I went in and I was like, hey, this, just come in. I'd like to get a job. I'm looking to be a mechanic. Just got out of school. And they told me no, that they didn't have any openings. They didn't, they didn't have any work, nothing going on, and to come back later. So like when I did that, I came down, it was a Monday, and I went in, like they opened at 8. So I went there at like 7:30 and realized that no one was there. So then I just kind of sat on the steps out front until they opened at like, they didn't open, but the owner of the marina came down at like 7:45, was opening up, and I was like, hey, here to get it, I'd like to get a job, that's that. And he told me no. And he's like, come back later. So I came back on Friday, same thing. I showed up at 7:45 in the morning. I was sitting on the steps when he opened the door, and I was like, hey, just kind of checking back, see if you got anything. And he told me no. So I left, and I came back on Monday at 7:45. I was like, hey, what's going on? And I did that for 3 weeks straight. And
3 weeks.
Yeah. And then they're
persistent.
like, okay, we'll figure something out. And they gave me a job.
Dang.
And then, then I was there for 10 years.
It's crazy how the times changed. Because, you even said you had to give a resume.
Oh, yeah.
I don't have a resume. I've never put one together. I went to school. Same thing. I was working at Publix, but I'd worked at Publix in Marathon before, and then transferred up to when I went to MMI.
Yep.
And then when I got out of MMI, I went straight down back to the Keys and walked into that marina, said, hey, I'd like a job. And they're like, cool, this is the shop, this is the yard, when can you start? I was like, you don't want to see my diploma, you don't want to see like anything, like you're telling me I just went to school for nothing? I could have just rolled up in here. And but yeah, that's pretty much how it went for me. I didn't even have a whole lot of experience, not even as much as you, fixing dirt bikes and stuff. The only thing I'd ever done was like on my truck, if a check engine light popped up, I'd put a code reader on it. Oh, this sensor needs to be replaced. Boom, replace it. And I'm a mechanic, you know what I mean? Like,
yep.
Type of deal. I had no experience. I'd never seen an outboard with the cowling off. Don't know why I became a boat mechanic. I guess my buddies were they were more interested into boats and stuff because they grew up fishing and doing the boating thing. And so they wanted to do it, and they had that idea for a while. And it was like halfway through my senior year, real last minute, I was like, man, do I really want to go to college? And then they brought that up. They're like, hey, we're going to this school. Like, if you want, you can, you know, there's space in the apartment for another dude. And I was like, why not, dude? Why not, man? I like engines. You know, I'm kind of a geek about engines and stuff. I'll sit on YouTube for hours just watching donut media, and apparently not enough because I didn't know about harmonic balancing. And somebody said Donut Media had a good video on harmonic. It's got to be Science Garage. I missed that guy. But anyway, yeah, that was how I got in there, and it was totally, I mean, very similar to you, but totally different, like for the actual hiring process.
Yeah, it's amazing how that's actually changed, which kind of, I mean, goes back to the search versus experience. I mean, you know, people that have experience now those people, the cert people, they can go in and be like, I have these certifications, this is what I know. But the experienced people can go in and be like, this is what I can do, and this is what I've done, this is what I want. And you know, like back then, you can, like, I was whatever I can get. Like, that's what I was thinking. You know, there was a very minimal negotiation there. Yeah. Whereas now, I mean, for the really experienced guys, you can kind of lay out what you want. Like you can really be like, you know, this is what I bill out. I bill, you know, I can fit, you know, depending on the work, obviously, you know, if you're doing repowers or massive diagnostics and stuff, you're not going to be billing out the same hours as someone that's just doing services all day. But if you're like, you know, look, I'm billing $190,000 every month and you know, repair orders, I mean, any shop's going to be like, okay, so, you know, what do you want? And then
when can you start?
Yeah, when can you start? I'm going to pay you this, because they're going to make, you know, it on the backside. So yeah, definitely the experience.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Since you started, what is your favorite kind of work to do? Because you said you'd take anything, right? Which I was kind of that guy. Like at the beginning when I first got hired, I was like, whatever you want me to do, just tell me what boat to get on, and I'll get started. You know, even if I don't know it, I'll pull out a manual. I'll do something like whatever you want. What ended up being your favorite thing to do? You said you could pick and choose. What would you choose?
What do you mean? Like,
what kind of jobs? Like,
for me now?
Yeah. For example, for me, I like electrical installations, like putting that autopilot that we put in the other day. I used to be so nervous about cutting dashes and drilling holes, like, you know, because I'm like, man, this is an expensive boat. I'm gonna friggin' destroy this thing. It's gonna be crooked, and it ended up being my favorite thing to do now. I love installing electronics and stuff, and the preparation and cutting out the dash, and
right.
What ended up being,
I mean, I just like doing different stuff. So I don't really have a real preference. Like for the most part, I don't like working on old stuff because of all the things that we've talked about in prior podcasts, but I work on anything. I mean, for the most part, like, I just enjoy doing something different. Like, you know, a different brand, a different engine, a different this, different that. Because I like to learn. I like to tinker. I like to, you know, play with it. I mean, I like to do the fun stuff. You know, I mean, I want to take a boat that's got 3 engines and put 4 on there. I want to do, that's the stuff I like doing, just because it's like, you don't know what's going to happen, but in the end, it's fun to play around with the new toys, like playing with Seakeepers and playing with the bigger boats and like the 600s and, you know, all these different things. I like playing with the new stuff and with whatever, you know. I mean, installing electronics, I like doing that too. I like putting in the stereos, power poles, trolling motors, jack plates. As long as it's changing, then I don't really have a preference. I mean, now that I'm getting older, I don't really want like going and having to be upside down rigging bilge pumps, but
Yeah.
macerator pumps, toilet work, but
Yeah. I've always I envy the people that can get into the bilge because I'm just a little too large for that. So I've got a lot of experience hanging upside down in the bilges.
Yep.
So that's definitely on the list of least fun things to do. But but I don't know. Back to that autopilot we put in. We had a few questions on that kind of stuff. People, especially our boy Austin Hall, he was asking stuff like, how do you prevent the fiberglass from chipping when you're cutting the hole?
Well, mainly painter's tape.
Electrical tape or painter's tape, yeah.
Painter's tape. Countersinking the drill bits or countersinking the holes where you drilled it, and also making sure that the blade that you're using, whatever you're using to cut, is a fine blade, for finish work. So like you want, generally a little bit more teeth. That's not always the, whole thing. Like if you're cutting, plastic, plexiglass, starboard, stuff like that, you want to use like a plexiglass blade with the right kind of teeth on it. You don't want to be in there using a demolition sawzall blade trying to cut out, this dash.
No.
You want a clean cut finish type of blade. So that's probably the number one is using the right blade, and then putting painter's tape on it. Also, I guess it depends what you're cutting out.
Yeah, I don't know. How so? What would you give me an example?
Like when you're putting templates on and stuff like that, depending on what you're installing will depend on what you're having to cut out. Like certain stuff, all you need is a hole saw, where you don't have to get the jigsaw or a sawzall out and have to like make a different kind of hole. You can just use one hole saw and in that case, you can just run it in reverse for a little bit till you get through the gel coat. Then,
Normally I just run it in reverse the whole time.
Yeah. So
yeah, it's quick enough, and I feel like it saves the teeth on the blade. So I don't know. It doesn't ever jam on me, and I hate that. I hate when it binds up and.
Oh yeah, rip your arm off.
Yeah. No, but yeah, another thing too is pressure. Like don't have a loose grip on the friggin' thing. I've started. Like, have you ever been mid-cut? You had to stop or whatever to reposition or something, and then when I started again, I was holding on too light, and then the thing just started smashing into the. Yeah, that's an early mistake you don't make again. You're like, oh man, okay, firmly grasp it.
Yeah, or binding your bit, like because if you're like cutting, try and go straight. Because if you start doing the whole, trying to turn it too much, you'll bind the blade, and then then you'll create a cut that's like wobbled, and you'll jam the blade, and that'll do the same thing. Like your material will snag the blade,
right?
And then now you're stuck. And then
you're just hammering the
gel coat
with the sawzall. Yeah, it's bad. Somebody also, I think it was Ben. I don't know how to pronounce it. Ben Douay, but. He said that he doesn't cut out the template. He just tapes the template on and cuts through it. Asked me if I thought it was, or asked us if we thought it was easier to cut it out, because we had cut it out in that video. I like to cut it out when it comes to like displays, like installing a Garmin or any kind of display. I like to cut it out because when you cut it out, even the outside edge, it looks exactly like what's going to be. It looks like the final product. You know what I mean? It's the same exact. So it's easier for me, I guess, to visualize how straight it's going to be, like,
right.
and where exactly it's lining up, where exactly the final product is going to be. And also I like drawing a line like in the cutout so that so then I'll just take the cutout off, put painter's tape on, and then cut with that Sharpie line that I drew instead of cutting through the template. Because for me, I don't know, maybe I'm doing it wrong, maybe I don't use enough tape, but it always snags with the blade and just starts tearing up, and it just becomes a nightmare. And it's like, how do you keep your line?
Yeah, you could also just cover the dash in tape and then cut your templates out and put them on there. For me, depends on if I'm feeling lazy. Depends on what I'm cutting out. I'll do it both ways. So sometimes I'll cut them out, sometimes I won't. I mean, and I guess it also kind of, for me, it depends on the size. So like for that autopilot, there was a very small bezel on it. So from where the cutout was to where the piece of the controller pad that covers what you cut out wasn't very much. So those you need to be pretty exact. Whereas other ones, you might have one that's got, that much coverage. So even if you are off on the cut, then it won't matter. So I've done them both ways. I don't really have depends on what kind of mood I'm in or what I'm doing, or if I'm like really thinking about it, or if I'm just in the flow of working on it. Sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm a real stickler for crooked installations. Like I don't know. Maybe I pay attention too much. Maybe it's like,
No, that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. You should don't be putting stuff in crooked, because
every single thing that I've ever installed, no matter how straight, you could take a level to it and it'll be perfect.
A level on a boat?
Well, get it on level ground. but like you could do some measurements and it might be the straightest thing ever. I always question it. I'm like, man, is that crooked? No, it's not. But maybe no. And I just put way too much thought into it. So I feel like I have to have that template cut out, looking at the final product and really making sure in the prep that it's not going to be crooked.
That also kind of goes into whether or not, where what's getting installed and where it's getting installed. So like the surrounding areas to certain stuff, you might be trying to put something on and, the GPS and the VHF and the radio that got put on before you even touch the boat is already like crooked and twisted. So it's like everything on the dash is already crooked. So, if you put yours on, like, what do you gauge it off of?
I'm going to find some kind of line on the dash, not any one of the electronics that were installed crooked, but I'm going to find some kind of line on the dash to make it parallel with. Like whether it be where your knees hit, like the very front of the console, or like where there's like a cutout for displays. Like I got to make it parallel with something. Yeah,
me too. I want it to be visually symmetrical. So like what I do is I'll like stand in front of wherever it's going, have my hand on the controller, on the wheel, and kind of feel like if I'm running the boat, what's this going to look like? I mean, because functionality is important. You don't want, your trim tab controller up here on like the, way out of the way. You want them right there next to either the steering wheel or that. Same thing for, jack plate or something like that. You want that to where when you put your handle down, you can either use the trim tabs or whatever. The autopilot, kind of same thing. You want that near your control of the boat. Whereas like, the displays, some people, that I guess it depends on the boat and the person where they want the stuff to go.
Yeah. Austin asked whether we go off the customer's opinion, or like where the customer wants it when installing some of that stuff. And for the most part, yes. Yeah, like if the customer says I want it there.
Yep, that's where it goes.
Unless it's in like a really bad spot and we see something that might be a better spot for it, and what about here? Think about functionality and aesthetics, and then maybe you're right, but generally we'll do what the customer wants, and unless they don't specify. A lot of them don't care. A lot of them are like, I trust your judgment. Just put it in there.
Well, sometimes you don't have a choice too, because sometimes the dash is just so plastered with all kinds of stuff that you really ain't got. But one spot to put it. So
sometimes you got to move stuff around.
Yep.
I mean, when it comes to big displays like that, you're not moving things around. But like, like let's say you had to cut out a display and maybe there's a little switch in the way,
right,
where the hole for the switch is going to be cut out anyway with where the display would be. You just move it and use your better judgment.
Yeah, I guess every boat's different because and every boat owner is different too. So depends on what's getting installed, what's on the dash, if the owner wants it, somewhere, because some people do, and like you said, unless it's something that's like, well, I mean, Bob, you don't really want that over there because of this,
Yeah.
So, and then we'll say that, we'll talk to them and be like, but if somebody's adamant about it, like they want this here, then, we'll even take pictures of stuff and show it to them. We'll, lay out the painter's tape and draw it out stencil and be like, send them a picture, like, you're sure you want this is where you want it, and yeah, that's where I want it. Then we send it.
By all means.
So
Yep.
it's a symbiotic relationship, and every case is different. But I guess to answer the question, yeah, we do it. We put it where people want it put, or we look at it and make sure, check the functionality of it. And
sometimes functionality is more important. Yep.
Yeah.
Like, when it comes to like installing compasses and stuff, you want to make sure they're in areas where there's not a whole lot of magnetic interference.
Yep.
Things, think about things like that. But also, like, I think somebody asked about an alternator whine that would happen, and then it would like cut out when he'd put it in gear.
Yeah.
Does that have to do with? Yeah, that does probably have to do with the installation of the amp, or because he said he added an amp. What would be causing that?
Well, you got,
as far as in the installation process, that could be.
Something's too close. Like, you got RFID somewhere, and now you're basically at a point of you got to diagnose it. So, kind of, we discussed this on, I think, the second episode 2 of the podcast about finding, diagnosing stuff and finding problems on the boat where you might be at the point. So he's got the stereo, he's got electronics, everything's all on the boat. And now when he runs the engine, there's a whine in the radio. So you probably need to, go to your batteries and disconnect everything except for the engine and the radio, and then start and run it and see if that whine's still there. And if it is, then you're going to need to start, tracking stuff back, mainly your power wires and your speaker wires.
Right.
So somewhere you've got either speaker wires or power wires or something is intertwined, or the remote wire to the amp, or, you could get feedback and stuff like that from all kinds of different things. So you really need to kind of get back to the basics and have only the engine and the stereo system, and then you can even get down to unplugging speakers. So you can unplug all the speakers and have one speaker in and see if it still has it. If it has it even, over all your speakers, then it's between your amp and your batteries. Your alternator could be overcharging. So if you're and you're getting feedback somehow through how the power wires and the grounds are connecting everything.
It's kind of weird how he says it cuts out when he puts it in gear, though. Like, what exactly does that mean? Does the whine go away as soon as he puts it in gear, or
yeah, that'd be a good thing.
Does audio start cutting out when he puts it in gear?
Yeah, if you put it in gear and the audio goes out, or if the whine goes out, or it's kind of weird. But yeah, I would disconnect everything and get back to just stereo, engine, run it, see what's going on, and look at the wiring, because something, you've either got feedback or you've got RFID, and something's running together somewhere.
Right. Back to that Garmin install, the autopilot install video, we did an update through the Garmin display with the little SD card, and Austin was asking if you can update all the electronics through the NEMA network.
It depends on your electronics, because some of the older stuff you can't, and a lot of the newer stuff you can. A lot of the newer stuff, they've got like SD card, like
Garmin has a master file with all of its device updates. You just download that to an SD card, put it in a MFD, and it'll update all the Garmin devices on that NEMA network.
But then you start introducing other branded stuff like Fusion radios and JL stereo, like other VHF radios, stuff like that. Some electronics still require you to put an SD card in the actual device that you're trying to update.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of them that you update it through the one MFD, and then that's it. You put your update on the SD card, put it in the unit, and then you can navigate to the device list based through the NEMA network.
Right.
and do the updates that way. So it all depends on what you're trying to update. And
But yeah, generally, I guess if it's like similar brand, if it's the same brand kind of thing, then yeah, like Garmin. Is Garmin the only one that does that, or do you think Simrad has like if you've got a whole integrated Simrad system, you think they have like a master file too? I've never really had to update.
Not really a master file, but there are some like devices, like if you got a Simrad display and X Simrad product, then you can update this product through the MFD. But then on some of them, like some of the older vessel views, you'd have to like this, which is Mercury and Simrad together.
Right, but technically you're getting that update off the Mercury website.
Yeah, you get the update off the website, but I'm saying you can't update the vessel view link through the vessel view, which is a MFD Simrad display. So
right.
like if you were to try and update this device, you couldn't do it through NEMA 2000.
Right.
You'd have to take the SD card, put it into that device, then go through the MFD to the device and update it that way. So it's all kind of brand specific and device specific.
Yeah. So I guess to answer that question, technically no, you can't update all devices through the NEMA network at the same time. Like with just from one.
Oh yeah, no.
If that's the way the question was formatted, but
yeah, if that's what he was asking, yeah.
But yeah, Garmin's, all that kind of similar branded things, yeah, you can. Speaking of staying on the NEMA subject, Austin, last question from him. He asked, it's a pretty good question. Why is it 60 ohms when checking the resistance in the middle, in between the two terminators, instead of 240 ohms? Because they're each 120 ohms.
Yep.
And there's
a
lot of crazy formulas and science behind it, but from my understanding, I had a loose understanding from school, and I recently just, out of curiosity, looked it up some more. And basically, it's like you're adding a second path so that more current can flow through it, in turn decreasing the resistance. So it's like basically what they're saying is, a good analogy was you take pipe A and pipe B, and pipe B is 2 times the size of pipe A, so pipe B is going to flow 2 times more water. But if they'd be equal if you just made a second pipe A and put it right next to it. And what you're doing with the resistors is just putting them in parallel. They're wired in parallel. So now you've got 2 circuits running next to each other. So basically double the current can get through and half the resistance.
Right.
In turn. Pretty much. It's a loose interpretation, but
yeah,
pretty interesting stuff. I mean, it's not really anything you'd ever have to care about, because all you got to know is if it's not 60 ohms,
you got a problem.
You got a problem. When it comes to things like that, like, it's cool to know these fun facts, but it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. You just know that these are the numbers you're supposed to have, and this is the number you're getting, and then you do what you do with that information.
Yeah, I'm kind of wired a little differently, because I don't really try and learn and retain stuff like that. I mean, like when it comes down to numbers and all that kind of stuff, like I don't even, for me, I make sure I know how to get the information and where to find it. And then as long as I can find the information and figure it out, then I'll figure it out based on the problem. So yeah, Ohm's law and all that stuff. I mean, I know Ohm's law, but I don't.
Yeah, they taught it at MMI briefly, like Ohm's law, watts, all that stuff. But it's not, in my experience, I haven't ever had to use that stuff. It's not really all that important in the field, unless you're like an electrician or something. Maybe I'm sure that'll.
Well, no, you use it, but
not directly.
But well, yeah, you use it directly sometimes in different situations, but you just go and use the calculation based on what you need to do. So like if you need to figure out something based on like how much amperage something's going to draw for, how you're going to fuse a circuit. So if you need to figure out, what fuse to put on a circuit, then you need to know that calculation. So
yeah,
I mean, but that doesn't mean you need to know all of the different calculations of how that works. You just need to know where to go find that. So when you're trying to figure out what fuse to put on a circuit, you can go and look up the amperage and get the numbers that you need, and then go plug it into the formula, and then that tells you what fuse you're going to need. So
I feel like that's more of a thing with like really big boats though, because like when it comes to smaller normal boats, I mean, just things that you're installing, it tells you what fuse to use 90% of the time. You'd hope.
But when you're think about where you're getting your power from
the the fuse block.
So if you're going from a fuse block, and that fuse block has got a certain gauge wire going to it that's already got, some sort of circuit protection on it, I mean, you're going to have, like, the fuse block itself is only going to be rated for X amount. Like, you've got a 50 amp fuse block or a 25 amp fuse block. So if you go and load that thing up with too many fuses, you could cause a problem.
You got to up the gauge of the wire that's feeding it, and up the circuit protection on that thing. And
by and large, just adding GPSs and stuff like that, most of that stuff is only, I mean, a lot of them take a 3.5 amp fuse. So
yeah, I think
you're
this
not
is really
overloading
an issue when you start throwing multiple radars and different antennas and all this kind of stuff. Like real big boat kind of things. On a smaller boat, it's not as much of a deal.
You're not going to use it as much, no.
Yeah, just kind of, use more common sense. Like, I'm not going to use 8 gauge wire to feed this fuse block that has every electronic hooked up to it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And try and run your amp to your stereo off of
it's
your fuse block. Yeah, no.
Yeah. More commonsensical things. Well, like we said, there was a lot of questions on this kind of stuff with the electronics and the Garmin install and NEMA and all that stuff, but to squeeze out one last one, our boy Braden McKay, he just, not really a question, but said that the Yamaha CL5 must be made by Garmin. Which, yes, it is. I think Garmin and Yamaha have been partnered for like 5 years now. Garmin's been making their displays, right?
Yeah, something like that. 4 or 5, like 18, something like that.
Those big brands, they do that kind of partner. Like you brought up Mercury and Simrad earlier with the Vessel View and all that. Those are made by Simrad. Then Yamaha's got Garmin. I really like those Garmin, like the small Garmin displays that.
Yeah, they are slick. The GHC 50s.
Yeah, they're really slick. They're like, I don't know. I like Simrad because I'm a Mercury guy. But them Garmin displays, I mean, they've gotten them really, really honed. They're pretty nice displays. I remember the first time seeing that Yamaha CL5 too, and I was like I had to double take at it. It was like right before we left the marina, but I looked down and I was like, oh, cool, little Garmin display, and then I was like, wait, that says Yamaha on it. Like, holy crap.
Yeah.
How did that happen? And that's when I found out they'd been partnered for a little bit. Yeah. Because I'm so used to seeing the really old Yamaha. What was that display called? That really old Yamaha display with the real finicky circular button that you use to directional. It's like the D-pad that.
Oh, I can't think of it. The
black plastic cover was always falling off the thing.
Yeah, it's not a 6x9. It's not. They got the CL7. It's in between the CL7. It's a 6x5. No, I can't think of. I know what one you're talking about. They discontinued that a while ago.
Yeah.
Man, I can't.
That one's definitely prevalent. Yeah. At least in the Keys it was.
There's still a lot of them out there.
Yeah, at least in the Keys. I'd only seen the one little Yamaha CL5 that looked like a Garmin, and I was like, wow, when did that happen? I've always known Mercury and Simrad, but
well, theirs says Simrad right on the back of the.
Yeah, on the back of the display. I'm sure the little Yamaha one says Garmin on the back. It's got to say Garmin somewhere.
I don't know if it does.
It's got to say it somewhere. Anyway, Yamaha's just like, all right, cool. We'll take this display, stamp our name on it, and give you 0 credit.
Yeah.
Even though everybody can look at it and tell it's a Garmin. Yeah, I think Yamaha did good there.
Yeah, that's a good partnership, and their stuff works really seamlessly. I mean, it's
Yeah,
it's a good partnership for sure.
It was. It's a partnership that almost made sense.
Yeah.
It's like, those are the big four. You've got Mercury, Yamaha, Simrad, and then Garmin, and they just had to pair each other up.
Well, the Simrad and Mercury came, they got together in like...
Was it 2016?
Yeah.
I think it was like a year before.
It was like 1 or 2
Yamaha,
years,
Garmin.
yeah.
Yamaha being late to the game again.
Right.
I'm just kidding.
No, I do think, well, I mean, Garmin's are just super user-friendly. I mean, they really are.
Yep.
I really would like to play around more with Furuno, though. I mean, Furuno's got some...
But Furuno's like a real fisherman's kind of display, right? Like,
they're like, it's like the iPhone and the Android. it's like a Mac and a PC.
Garmin being
the Mac.
The iPhone, Mac, yep. For sure. It's more simplistic and all that. I hadn't messed with too many Furunos either because, for obvious reasons, Two Conks had most of theirs locked with like a passcode. And
yeah.
So even if we took the boat for a sea trial,
no.
Got no display.
No. The user ability of it is really like, I mean, you can do all kinds of stuff. Like they let you go in there and mess with everything. Whereas Garmin, it's kind of like you can do this, or this. Like,
but you have to know what you're doing, right? When you mess with a Furuno.
Yeah. Furunos, you definitely need to know how to set it up and how to mess with everything, but you can really hone, that system into whatever you want it, to do, which is like, I mean, that's exactly it. It's, the iPhone of the electronics world, the boating, marine electronics.
Furuno's the Android of the boating world. Yeah. No, I see what you're saying. Yeah, it would be interesting to learn more about that stuff and even more about Simrad because, as much as I've messed with Mercury and I know that whole partnership, I don't really know a whole lot of Simrad. I know that I think we might be installing a Simrad autopilot here pretty soon, a hydraulic one. So that'll be cool. Maybe it's a chance to get more familiar with that system.
They're not a whole lot different than the Garmin. I mean, you got the controller, a little hub, the pump, the compass, and that's pretty much it. I mean, that's
that one we installed was nice. No pump, steer by wire.
Oh yeah, any of the DTS or electronic steering stuff is way simpler,
quickest,
plug
easiest,
and play. Like
it's awesome. Well, we're starting to run out of time here, but let's
these are starting to run long, aren't they?
Yeah, let's get one last question in. Mr. Blake Jackson, he asks, plastic fuel tank or aluminum?
Depends on the application.
They both have problems.
They both got their downfalls.
Yeah. Which one would you say generally lasts longer? I guess it also depends on what kind of boat it's in, because some boats were better about sealing the tanks than others, and some would let water get in and build up, and it never has a place to drain. Like I think it's one of the contenders. They were pretty notorious about fuel tanks going up to about 2006 or something, because there was like nowhere for the water to drain, but it would pool up, it would leak in and stay on top of the tank, and it just corrode a hole through it. Cause
same thing with a Parker.
Okay, yeah. So a couple of boats that were notorious for this kind of thing, but
they both have their pros and cons. I mean, aluminum is going to corrode. Plastic's not going to corrode, but I've seen a lot of the poly tanks crack. I think the bigger problem with the poly tanks is that the pickup tubes and the fuel cylinders go bad and corrode, and because they're a metal insert, aluminum, metal, whatever they're made out of, in the plastic tank, those inserts, when it comes time to mess that stuff, they just spin in the plastic.
Yeah.
So getting them out becomes this nightmare, and now you've got to fabricate a way of, putting a new pickup or fuel cylinder or whatever into the tank. So that can be quite the problem.
Is it fair to assume that they have a pretty similar lifespan, given that they're properly sealed and
Yeah.
Done the right way?
Yeah.
Or which one would you say lasts longer if you had to give one the edge?
Probably the poly tank.
The poly tank, for sure.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, there's aluminum tanks that got 40-year-old tanks. So
yeah, well, those are well-built boats.
Yeah. I don't know how big of a poly tank you can have, though. I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean, Boston Whaler makes some poly tanks.
Like big ones on their bigger boats?
Like their 28s and stuff. I think that those are poly tanks.
Another thing I've seen with poly tanks is with the age, they'll start sort of concaving. Like they'll sink in, and then when it comes time to finally replace that sender, or was it one that I think I took the sender out and then the tank sort of like after having the sender out, it concaved a bit, and I went and got a sender of the identical length and tried to put it in, and it hit the bottom before. So then I had to get a smaller sender, and then all those little inserts that you were talking about for you to screw it in, those were all messed up. And because plastic will warp based on the fuel. You know, with the fuel heating and cooling, it'll disform, and then like you said, like sometimes it'll disform on the top. So now the top has like a pool. It's like a bowl. Yeah. And now all the water that gets on the tank now just pools right on top of your sender or your, your pickup, and that can cause premature failure. So, I mean, they both have their pros and cons. So, and you said you've seen poly tanks crack.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Just old brittle plastic, and then you fill it with 60, 100 gallons of fuel at 8 pounds a gallon. So, what's that? So you got 50.
Too much math. It's a lot of weight.
It's a lot of weight. So that's all bouncing around and flushing around in there. And then it's heating and contracting and, sucking in on the plastic. It just, over time, the, flexing of that plastic or poly, whatever, it'll crack.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never heard of that, but I hadn't seen too many of those things go wrong.
Well, it's like the 6-gallon tanks, the red ones, the little ones that you put in like tenders and stuff, and leave one of those in the sun for, if you see one that's 10, 15 years old that's been sitting in the boat out in the sun for that long, it's all cracked and deforming. And
but what if the one in the boat was never exposed to the sun? It still dries out. It still rots out.
It's the fuel. Okay. The fuel that really
maybe it's no. Would it have anything to do with the ethanol or?
Oh yeah.
If you put ethanol fuel,
it'll speed it up. Yeah. I mean, think about this: take a 5-gallon bucket and then put fuel in it.
Oh, put the lid on it. Yeah.
And then put the lid on it, and it sucks the whole bucket.
That's weird.
So
that's weird how it does that. How does it do that? Do you know the science behind that? Or?
No, I don't. No. I don't. I mean, it has to do with the temperature of the fuel. So as the temperature, I don't know if when the fuel heats up that I don't know. I mean, I don't know, because somehow it's sucking the air. It's taking the oxygen cells out of the, air. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not a doctor, so.
Yeah, well, I think on that note, we're running out of time here.
Yeah, we're plenty over time. So
so keep sending the questions our way.
Yeah,
we will try to squeeze as many of them as we can into these videos. We
might have to just kind of, maybe even do a couple a week for a little while to try and catch up. But I don't know if we're ever gonna catch up. We started out the first episode like 40 minutes. Now we're up to like an hour and a half. So, we're going to get to as many as we can. Send the comments. They can email us.
Yep. Email us at askbab@bornagainboating.com. And we're excited to hear from you.
Yep. See you next time.
Yep.